Blessings in the name of the Lord Jesus. Welcome to Paraclet TV, making disciples through the power of the Holy Spirit. At this point in time, I would like to give an example of processes and products that can be graded with the use of a rubric or with the use of a checklist or a rating scale. So these are now the example of processes. And the processes can be classified into four. We can have physical skills. We can ask our students to use the equipments, or we can also assess their oral communication or their work habits. Say for example, in the physical skill, we can let them do or play a musical instrument. Or we can ask them to do a forward roll or any type of physical activity, such as in physical education, because we are assessing their skills. So a rating scale, a checklist, or even rubrics can be used for this. In the use of equipment, an example can be preparing a slide for the microscope for a biology major or in a science class, or you can also make use of the different laboratory devices or tools or equipment within the laboratory, and using them can be graded with the use of the assessment tools, or even the use of laptop or the use of computers or the different applications within that can also be an example of judging the processes, the different steps, how to make it. Then in oral communication, the processes of making a speech to the class and the processes of reading aloud can also be graded. In work habits, you can assess through the different tools how they converse in a foreign language, or how they work independently or even work cooperatively with other classmates. So can you give another examples of physical skills? Another example for the use of equipment? Another example to look into the process in oral communication, as well as the process of work habits. Do you have any question or any example? Okay, let us proceed with some products to judge in the use of rubrics, rating scale, or of the checklist. Now, a product, say for example, constructing objects. Now, with the use of constructed objects, we can ask our students to do a wooden bookshelf, or a set of welds, or yung welding, yung i-weld nila. Or we can also ask them to make an handmade apron, or with the use of watercolor painting. Now, that is about constructed objects. Now, in a written essay, themes, report, or term papers, we can also ask them to theatrical play. We can ask them to write or a term paper about it. And then about other academic products, an example of that is a written analysis of a certain article that they have read, or if they have giving them a story to read, a pocket book to read, and afterwards they are going to give their own point of view about what they have read. That is an example, or book review we call, that is an example of other academic products. So these are example of products. So can you give an example of constructed objects or projects or written outputs? Or can you give another example for academic products? Now, the rubrics has different types. There are different types of rubrics. We have the so-called analytic rubrics. When we say analytic rubrics, these rubrics are used to evaluate criterion separately. So, meaning if there are 4 criteria to consider in judging a certain performance, no, analytic rubrics rather is a very detailed assessment tools to look into the different criteria in that aspect. So what are the advantages of an analytic rubrics? It gives diagnostic information to teacher. So the assessment of even the minor, not only the macro skills, are being graded in an analytic rubrics. Gives formative feedback to students. Of course, it will be very helpful for the students to know what they have already gained and what they lack. It is easier to link to instruction than holistic rubrics. So the analytic rubrics is easier to look and to be used for instruction. And analytic rubrics is good for formative assessment. So when you are looking into the performance or the achievement of your students while you are developing a certain lesson, a big concept, then it's good to use analytic rubrics for formative assessment. But it is also adaptable for summative assessment, and you need an overall score for grading. You can combine the scores of the separated criterion because an analytic rubrics deals very detailed in each criterion of the entire performance. Okay? And then we have also another type, if also holistic rubrics. And when we say holistic rubric, it is used to evaluate all criteria simultaneously. So in an analytic rubrics, each criterion is being judged separately. Unlike in holistic rubrics, all the criteria are judged in one setting. So what's the advantages? The advantages, one, scoring is faster than with analytic rubrics because analytic rubrics is more detailed. It requires less time to achieve inter-rater reliability. Yes, because if you have, say for example, in a contest, you have three judges, and you are using a holistic rubrics, it is very easy to have an average of the 3 judges. It is good for summative assessment. Okay, the next type of rubrics is general rubrics. It is used to describe of work, gives characteristics that apply to the whole family of tasks. So a general rubrics can be used to judge a whole family of tasks. Say for example, you are teaching your, say for example, in the case of you as a teacher to be, your students of education, you are going to have a mock demonstration teaching or a demonstration teaching at the end. That is called a general rubrics. A general rubrics can be used because it will measure the whole family of tasks. Or even if you're going to defend a thesis, a general rubrics can be used for that. Okay? What's the advantages? It can be shared with the students so that you will know what are the criteria, what are the indicators to look into when you do a certain performance. It can also be reused with several tasks or assignments. It supports learning by helping students see good work as bigger than one task, as bigger as one task. So general rubrics will help the students to really see their own selves as they are being assessed by their instructors. Support student self-evaluation. So a general rubrics can be used because general rubrics are largely or popularly used by all schools that are available, of course, in the internet. Then we have also a student can help construct general rubrics. So there is, in a general rubrics, you can ask your students to help you create what are some of the criteria or indicators that must be seen in a rubrics. Then we have the last type is the task-specific rubrics. So, what is the task-specific rubrics? The task-specific rubrics is somewhat kind an analytic rubrics. Why? Because it used to describe work that refers to specific content of a particular task. So, a specific content of a particular task. Say, for example, you are going to make a thesis as your task, the bigger task. The entire thesis in your defense can be judged by a general rubrics or even by a holistic rubrics. But when a part of the task, say for example, the statement of problem is as a minor task compared to the whole thesis, then when the statement of the problem is being just alone, that is called, you are going to use a rubrics that is called task specific for judging the statement of the problem. The advantages of the task specific, teachers sometimes say using this makes scoring easier. So when you use the task specific, because you are only confined to a minor task or one task, then it is easier to score. It requires less time to achieve inter-rater reliability. Okay, so looking at the defense, in the final defense, say for example, you are going to submit a title proposal or just the title. So the title is being judged, we call that as task specific rubrics. You can make use of a rubrics that is called task specific, and that mini task of producing the title or the approval of the title is already one good example of task which requires the use of task specific rubrics. Now, let us look at the difference between the analytic and holistic rubrics. Let us see the difference between the two, because a holistic can also be general and analytic can also be task specific. Their definition: in a holistic, all criteria are evaluated simultaneously, while in analytic, each criterion is evaluated separately. No, so yun ang kaibahan. When we say holistic, all criteria are judged simultaneously, while an analytic, each criterion is judged separately based from the other criterion. Advantages of the holistic: it is faster, view the performance as a whole, resembles real-life assessment because of the holistic, less time for inter-rater reliability because of, if you have three judges, because they have judged using all the criteria, then it is very easy to do the average. It is good for summative. No, it is good for summative assessment. While in analytic, it identifies the strength, the weaknesses of each participant for each dimension, and some key elements may be given higher weight in scoring. And of course, the limitation of holistic: no focus on details. Yeah, because it's whole. It's the judging is done as a whole, although you have the rubrics. One overall score, less precise than analytical, not good for formative, and doesn't communicate how to improve the performance. While an analytic, the limitation scoring is slower. Yeah, it's true. It is difficult to identify well-defined elements and longer time for inter-rater reliability. Okay. Let us see an example of a basic homework rubric. So in this example, you will find that there are 5 columns and there are of course 6 lines. So on the first line, you have the numerical data, 4, 3, 2, 1, and on the first column, you have 5 criteria. The first criteria is neatness, completion, timeliness, accuracy, and work shown. And you will find on the first criterion about neatness, you are going to have 4 points if your homework is in an orderly packet and is incredibly neat with no smudges or tears. So that's number 4. You can have 3 scores. Homework is in an orderly packet and is neat with a few smudges or tears. So it is better that the few must be quantified. No. Number 2, homework is in a packet with several smudges or tears. So smudges or tears must be quantified. Say for example, 5 smudges or 5 tears. Homework is disorderly with many smudges or tears. So in completion, a second criterion, you will get 4. All of the assigned work is complete. Number 3, score 3, most of the assigned work is complete. So the most some and student did not turn in assignment, that's 1. It is very objective. You can have that. But most and some for 3 and 2 must be quantifiable. No, I prefer to make a rubric that is more objective than using a descriptive word that is not clearly defined. So, in order to avoid subjectivity, you have to quantify your indicators. So, in this example, 4, 3, 2, 1 are the scores to be given, and the neatness, completion, timeliness, accuracy, and work are called the variables, or they are called the criteria. And its criterion, say for example neatness, we have the indicators or the basis of scoring. Indicators are what are being used as a descriptors for its criterion. Okay, so let's have an example of analytic rubric. Say for example, in here you will find, say for example, you are asking your students to do a presentation, and in the presentation there are, in this example, there are 3 major criteria. We have the use of visual aids, the performance, and the knowledge. And then the descriptive word for the performance, we have poor, developing, and superior. Poor, developing, and superior. How will we know that the presentation is poor based from the use of visual aid? It is poor when there is no visual aid, or if there is a visual aid, it is distracting visual aid. Okay. It is developing when there are visual aids used, but aids don't add to the verbal presentation. And it is superior when visual aids are clear and necessary additions, no necessary additions to be provided for the presentation, and so on and so forth. How about the knowledge? The knowledge, you are going to get a score as poor in knowledge when presenter makes significant mistakes about material. And I go on numbering how many mistakes. It is developing, knowledge is developing when the presenter shows mastery of the presented materials but struggles with related materials. And the last one, it is superior when presenter has mastery of presentation content and related material. Okay. So here is another example, and you will find here the different criteria, but the criteria are already a description. No, not criteria, but indicators. I call this as indicators. Okay, so let us look at formalizing the rubrics. So in this example, you must have the title of the rubrics, like in this checklist. This is an example of a checklist, but it is done formally because there is a title. So there is a personal data, the name and the school, and other important information or profile about the student or about the group that you are going to rate. So that is an example of data. And then you have, of course, the second major variable that you're going to do scoring in this checklist. So assessment of intrapersonal and interpersonal competencies. And then what is good in here, there are directions that you are going to follow. Directions indicate the degree to which you think the following statement or indicators are true or false in assessing your principal and head teacher's interpersonal competencies. Check the appropriate column. So the columns, there is a numerical scale, and there are also qualitative definition of the numerical score. It is when you give 5, it is completely true to yourself. And completely true to yourself, to make it clear, about 81 to 100% true, making it more objective. You score 4, which is described as generally true, but to make it objective, 61% to 80% true. So it is more objective if you're going to that, and so on and so forth. And so another part of that is, you, in this example, you will have now a very, we can call this as holistic rating scale or rubrics. And we have the indicators. The interpersonal competency can be called as the major variable or major criterion. And then letter A will be the minor criterion or sub-variable, and letter B are also sub-variables. And 1 to 10 and 1 to 7 are called indicators describing the sub-variable or the sub-indicator or the sub-criterion. And of course, the 7 are the indicators of the second criterion. For the major criteria, interpersonal competency. And then you have the columns to check if there is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and the description of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 are already in the direction or direction to follow. So let us look at these rubrics. So evaluation tool rubrics. If an example that this is what I made that is included in my book, Evaluation Tools Rubrics, Thesis Proposal Defense. Okay, so you will find the group name in here. This is an example of a formal rubrics. Course name, student, then the course year, subject, and so on. Then direction, rate the document by using the criteria. So very good, good, fair. So the numerical value, and then you have your definition. Okay, so here are now our indicator. You can name this as variable or criteria. The first criteria is the title is properly formulated. This is an example of analytical rubrics. Analytical rubrics. Title is properly formulated. The introduction is statement of the problem, the scope, and the limitation. When it is very good, title, major variables, goals, respondents, or subjects are clearly stated because these are the 3 major elements of the title. If these 3 are included, you can have very good. But lacks 1 of the elements, lacks 2 of the elements, title needs improvement, title needs to be changed. So those are examples. So what can we say in the introduction? Rationale, literature, statistical foundation, and format are adequate. So if 1 is missing, you will just get good. If 2 are missing, you will just get fair, introduction needs improvement, and so on and so forth. Okay, so in summary, in the making of a rubric, these are the following elements that you have to accomplish in the making of a rubric to be used formally in a performance inside the classroom. 1, the title of the rubric, if it is for presentation, if it is for a rubric for a drama skit, a rubric for creative presentation, a rubric for term paper, and so on and so forth. Then the direction must be clear, the name of the participant or the group, important profile, if there is a leader, it is a sub-leader, or section, you can use that. Then we have the criteria. You have to be specific with your major criteria, then the sub-criteria, and the indicators or the description of the different criteria that you're going to include in a rubric. Then the scales must be more on quantitative to make it objective. If you are going to use as your major description such as very good, when you put what is very good, there must have a numerical value of that. And then total, and then the last one is general comments. So these are now the important parts of a rubric.
Share Jesus.
Subscribe and
Subscribe,
share
share,
Haraplet
Haraplet TV.
TV.
Go, go, go.